Have you ever met someone who walked straight into your life like they already knew your soul? Lorenzo did. On a stormy night in Palawan, the billionaire who had everything met a barefoot woman on a lonely road. She looked him in the eyes and said, "I've been waiting for you." She knew his past, his secrets, his pain. And when they fell in love, he thought she had saved him. But Lorenzo never imagined she wasn't even supposed to exist. This is the story of the woman who came with the rain, and the price of a love that was never meant to stay. If you believe in second chances, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your story starts here.
The wind hit the island before the rain did. A heavy, suffocating wind that made the palms bend low against the gray sky. Lorenzo de la Vega stood on the balcony of his grandmother's old house, holding a glass of whiskey, watching the ocean swallow the last light of the day. The house was falling apart, a forgotten Spanish villa in the hills of Palawan. And Lorenzo liked it that way. It matched how he felt. He had flown in that morning from Manila, leaving behind boardrooms, angry shareholders, and 100 calls he wouldn't answer. He came to sign the last papers, sell the resorts, end everything, disappear. That was the plan. But the storm had other ideas. The first thunder cracked like a warning shot. Then the rain poured, heavy, wild, tropical. He didn't notice the figure on the road until lightning flashed. A woman, alone, barefoot, walking slowly along the edge of the winding path, her long dark hair sticking to her face. She wasn't running for cover. She wasn't even looking at the road. She was looking at him. Straight at him. Lorenzo froze. His hand tightened around the glass, and then she lifted her hand, a soft wave, and she smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile you give a stranger. It wasn't even the kind you give a friend. It was a smile that said, "I know you." Lorenzo slammed the glass on the balcony rail. "What the hell?" he whispered. He ran down the steps before his brain could catch up. The rain hit his skin like cold knives. His leather shoes sank into the mud. But the woman stood still. She didn't move when he stopped a few steps away. She was young, maybe 25. Brown skin glowing even under the storm. Eyes dark as the sea at night. And wearing a simple white dress, soaked through. She tilted her head. "You're late. You've been waiting for me." But the traditions of a stranger? They sat by the fireplace later that night. Lorenzo poured her tea. She didn't ask for it, but somehow it felt right. The storm raged outside, wind howling through the old walls. He broke the silence first. "So, where are you from, Amaya?" She smiled faintly. "Here. Palawan? My ancestors were born on this land before it had a name." Lorenzo leaned back, studying her. She looked young, fragile, but her voice carried something ancient. "You don't sound like anyone I've met." She met his eyes. "That's because I'm not." Hours passed like minutes. Lorenzo found himself talking about his businesses, the emptiness of money, the reasons he came to the island. She listened, quiet, intent. When she spoke, it was never about herself, but her words cut deep, like she knew exactly what haunted him. At some point, he asked, "So, why were you walking in the rain, alone?" She answered without blinking, "I was waiting for you." And he didn't question it, because somehow It felt true. At dawn, Lorenzo woke on the couch, a blanket over him. Amaya was gone. He rushed outside, heart racing. The road was empty. The rain had stopped. But on the porch rail, a silver medal hung by a leather cord. His grandmother's medal.
The morning after the storm broke like any other tropical sunrise, fierce, golden, and deceptively calm. Lorenzo stood on the porch, turning the silver medal over in his hands. It was hers. There was no mistake. He had watched his grandmother's coffin being lowered into the ground when he was 10. His father had placed this exact medal over her folded hands, and now it lay in his palm, untarnished, warm, like it had never been buried. He clenched it tightly. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered. Behind him, the old wooden door creaked. He turned. Amaya stood there, dry, calm, wearing the same simple white dress, like she'd never left. Lorenzo's heart nearly stopped. Where did you go?" She smiled softly. "I never left." He took a breath, fighting the urge to question everything at once. Instead, he held up the medal. Where did you get it?" Amaya's eyes softened. "It was given to me." "By who?" "By her." She nodded toward the house, toward the room where his grandmother had once slept. Lorenzo felt a shiver run down his arms. "It's impossible." Amaya tilted her head slightly. "Is it?" They sat inside, a faint breeze coming through the windows. Lorenzo leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the woman who had shown up in his life like a ghost. "You said you knew my grandmother." Amaya nodded. "She knew of me. She called for me once, a long time ago." He frowned. "What does that even mean?" Amaya wrapped her hands around a steaming cup of tea, the same he had left untouched the night before. "She called when she was afraid for you." "I was a child." Amaya met his gaze, eyes calm, unwavering. "You were a boy who couldn't sleep, a boy who heard voices in the dark, who woke screaming, who dreamed of falling and never hitting the ground." Lorenzo's heart slammed against his ribs. He hadn't told anyone about that, not even his father. He felt the air thicken in the room. How do you know that?" Amaya's voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Because I've been waiting for this moment since then." The silence stretched between them. Lorenzo forced himself to speak. "Who are you?" Amaya placed the cup gently on the table. "My name is Amaya. My blood is of this island. My family are healers, protectors. We called when the line is about to break." "The line?" She nodded. "Your bloodline." Lorenzo laughed, shaking his head. "You gotta be kidding me. You're saying you're, what, some kind of witch?" Amaya didn't flinch. "Call it what you want. Your family carries a curse, Lorenzo. One that ends with you." He stared at her incredulous. "A curse? Seriously? This is insane!" She gave him a look that silenced his sarcasm. "A curse that takes every man before you, slowly, from the inside out." Lorenzo swallowed hard. "What curse?" Amaya's eyes darkened. "The curse of destroying everything you love." Memories flickered behind Lorenzo's eyes. His father, a brilliant businessman, dead at 45 from a heart attack. His older brother, dead at 26 in a car crash after a fight with his fiancée. His uncle, vanished to sea. His relationships, women who left him, friends who betrayed him, deals that crumbled. A trail of wreckage. Was it bad luck? Bad choices? Or... He shook his head violently. "No, that's life. People die, business fails." Maya leaned forward. "When was the last time you trusted someone and didn't lose them?" Lorenzo opened his mouth, closed it. He felt something twist inside his chest. She whispered, "Your grandmother called for me to protect you, but I couldn't come until now." He swallowed. "Why now?"
Amaya looked at him, a strange sadness in his eyes. Because your heart is finally open. They spent the day in silence. Amaya moved through the house like she belonged there. She cleaned the kitchen, lit old candles, and whispered words Lorenzo didn't understand as she traced her fingers along the door frames. He watched her and felt something, a strange pull. It wasn't desired, not yet. It was something deeper, like he had known her in another life, or in a dream. That evening, Lorenzo found her standing by the old well behind the house. The sun had set, the sky painted in soft blues and burning orange. She was barefoot on the grass, eyes closed, humming softly. He approached quietly. "What are you doing?" Amaya opened her eyes slowly. "I'm asking for permission." "From who?" She smiled gently. "From the ones who came before us." Lorenzo rubbed his face, half laughing. You're either completely crazy, or I am." Amaya turned to him. Her expression softened. "You are not crazy, Lorenzo. You are cursed." For a moment, he just stood there staring at her. He opened his mouth to say something sarcastic, but the words never came. Instead, she walked up to him, so close he could feel her breath. "I came because your heart was calling, and now it's time to break the chain." Lorenzo whispered, "How?" Amaya reached up and placed her hand over his chest. A warmth spread through him, soft at first, then intense. "You have to trust me." For the first time in his life, he wanted to. But trusting someone meant giving them the power to destroy you. And that was exactly what he feared the most.
The rain returned that night. Not the violent downpour of the first storm, but a slow, steady drizzle. Lorenzo lay awake in his grandmother's old bedroom, the walls humming with the sounds of water tapping on the roof. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Amaya. She moved around the house like she belonged there. She spoke with the calm of someone who knew the end of the story before it even began. And worst of all, she knew him. Knew his fears, his past, his nightmares. Things no one else could have known. At some point, the need to know became stronger than the fear. He left the bed and walked barefoot down the old wooden stairs. The living room was dark, except for the soft glow of the fireplace. And there she was. Amaya sat on the floor by the hearth, legs crossed, staring into the flames. She didn't turn when he entered, but she spoke. "I knew you'd come." Lorenzo felt his pulse skip. "Are you always this sure of everything?" She smiled faintly. "No, only of you." He sat beside her. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. The fire cracked softly. The scent of rain drifted in through the open window. Then Lorenzo spoke, his voice low. "I don't believe in fate." Amaya turned her head slightly, eyes still on the fire. "That's because you've been running from it your whole life." He let out a soft laugh. "You talk like you know me better than I know myself." Finally, she looked at him. Her eyes, dark, endless. "I do." He felt a strange heat spread in his chest, a mix of fear and something dangerously close to trust. He said quietly, Tell me who you really are." Amaya shifted, folding her legs under her. "My family has lived on this island for hundreds of years. We are not healers the way the world understands. We listen to what others refuse to hear." Lorenzo frowned. "You mean like shamans?" She nodded softly. "Guardians of the threads that tie people to their destinies." "And my family?" Amaya's gaze darkened. "Your ancestors were cursed long before you were born. A curse tied to greed, to betrayal, and to a choice made by a man who thought he could own what was never his to take." Lorenzo's breath caught. "My great-grandfather?" She nodded softly. "He broke a sacred vow.
and every son born after him carried the weight of his sin. Lorenzo swallowed hard. And now it's my turn? Amaya's voice softened. Unless you break the chain. The fire flickered, casting golden light across her face. Lorenzo stared into the flames. I don't know how to fix what I don't understand. Amaya reached for his hand, a slow, deliberate touch. You don't need to fix the past. She entwined her fingers with his. You need to let it go. Her touch burned, but it wasn't the fire. It was something deeper, something alive beneath his skin. For a second, the world seemed to slow down, and in that silence, he felt it. The weight he'd been carrying his entire life. The shadows of every man before him. The fear of loving. The fear of losing. All pressing against his heart. He met her eyes. He whispered, "Will you help me?" Amaya's lips curved into a soft, almost sad smile. That's why I'm here. The rain fell harder outside, and inside, Lorenzo felt a dam break inside him. He leaned closer, unable to stop himself, their faces inches apart. He whispered, "Why do I feel like I've known you forever?" Amaya's breath touched his skin. "Because you have." Their lips met softly, not desperate, not rushed, but with the slow, inevitable pull of a tide returning to shore. A kiss that felt like it had waited centuries to happen. When they pulled apart, Amaya rested her forehead against his. She whispered, "I won't stay." Lorenzo felt his heart sink. "What do you mean?" Her eyes shimmered in the firelight. "I came to break your chains, not to become one." He cupped her face gently. "I don't want you to leave." Amaya closed her eyes, pressing into his touch. "I was never meant to stay, Lorenzo." They stayed there until the fire died, holding each other. No promises, no lies, only the weight of a connection neither of them could explain or deny.
The morning after their kiss, the storm gave way to a sky so blue it felt surreal. The island seemed to breathe again. Lorenzo woke with the weight of Amaya's head still resting on his chest. Her eyes were closed, her face peaceful, and for a wild moment he wondered if she was even real. He brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Her skin was warm under his fingers, her breathing soft. Definitely real. But everything else about her felt like a dream. She stirred slowly, opening her eyes, dark, luminous, and clear. Lorenzo whispered, "Good morning." Amaya smiled faintly. "It is, for now." He frowned. "What does that mean?" She sat up, folding her legs beneath her. Her eyes drifted to the window, where the sunlight painted golden lines across the old wooden floor. She said, "It means the storm outside is over, but the storm inside you has only begun." They spent the morning in silence. Amaya moved around the kitchen, preparing herbs and crushing leaves with a stone pestle, movements precise, almost ritualistic. Lorenzo watched her from the doorway, arms crossed. "You're not going to explain that, are you?" She didn't look up. "I don't explain. I show." He chuckled dryly. "You're impossible." She glanced at him over her shoulder. "And yet you can't stay away?" Lorenzo's mouth opened, but no words came. She was right. By midday, they sat at the back porch. The house overlooked the hills, rolling into the sea, a view Lorenzo had barely noticed in years. Now it felt like he was seeing it for the first time. Amaya placed a small wooden box on the table between them. He raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" She opened it slowly. Inside, a bundle of old letters, tied together with a thin red ribbon. Lorenzo frowned. "Where did you get those?" Amaya answered softly, "They belong to your grandmother." He picked one up, fingers brushing against brittle paper. The ink had faded,
But the handwriting, it was his grandmother's. He unfolded the top letter. It was dated May 12th, 1956. His eyes scanned the words. To the keeper of the line. If you are reading this, it means the curse still lives. My son, my grandsons, they are falling one by one. I feel the darkness closing in. Please protect the last of my blood when the time comes. I beg you. Lorenzo felt his throat tighten. He flipped to the next letter. And the next, each one a desperate plea, begging for protection, begging for help. Letters his grandmother had written to someone who wasn't supposed to exist. Someone like Amaya. He looked up. These are real. Amaya nodded. Yes, they are. Why didn't I know about this? She gave him a long, searching look. Because you weren't ready to know. Lorenzo slammed the letters down. This is insane. You're telling me my grandmother wrote to some guardian spirit and you just happened to show up when I'm about to sell everything and vanish? Amaya met his anger with silence, a deep, steady silence. And then she pulled something from around her neck, a chain. On it, the same metal he had found on the porch. Lorenzo's eyes widened. He whispered, That belonged to her. Amaya nodded. She gave it to me, long before she died. The air grew heavier between them. Lorenzo ran a hand through his hair. Why me? Why now? Amaya's voice dropped to a whisper. Because you're the last one, and time is running out. That night, the dreams began. Lorenzo woke in a sweat, heart racing, chest tight. Visions burned behind his eyes. A man in a dark suit falling from a cliff. A boy drowning in the sea. A woman screaming in a language he didn't understand. And always a shadow watching. A shadow with eyes that burned like embers. Amaya sat beside him, holding his hand as he gasped for breath. It's starting, she whispered. He shook his head, wiping his face. What is? The past is waking up inside you. He stared at her. I don't want this. Amaya squeezed his hand gently. I know. But I can't stop it, can I? She looked into his eyes, soft, almost aching. No. But you can survive it. The following day, Lorenzo found her standing in front of the mirror in his grandmother's room. She held the medal in her hand. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You said you came to break the chain? She nodded. And how do we do that? Amaya's eyes met his in the mirror. You have to face the shadow that follows you. Lorenzo laughed bitterly. Face it! What am I supposed to do? Fight a ghost? Amaya turned slowly. No, you have to forgive it. He stared at her like she had lost her mind. Forgive it? She nodded. Forgive yourself. They stood there, locked in a silent battle. Neither wanted to lose. Until finally, Lorenzo asked, voice low, almost breaking, And what if I can't? Amaya stepped closer, her hand reaching for his. Then I'll stand with you until you can. And somehow, that terrified him more than the curse itself.
The storm came back on the fifth night, but this time it stayed outside. Inside the house, the real storm had already begun. Lorenzo sat alone in his grandmother's study, the one room Amaya never entered. Old books lined the shelves, maps of the island, deeds, dusty portraits of long-forgotten men. His bloodline, all of them dead before their time. Lorenzo stared at a black-and-white photograph on the desk. His father at 25, dark eyes, confident smile. A man who thought he had the world in his hands. 3 years after that photo, he was gone. The door creaked behind him. He didn't turn. I said I wanted to be alone, Lorenzo muttered. But no voice answered. He felt it before he saw it. The air grew colder, sharp against his skin. His breath hung in the air like smoke. Slowly, he turned, and there it was, a shadow in the doorway. No face, no form, just darkness, watching him. He stood up abruptly, heart slamming against his ribs. "Who's there?" No answer. The shadow didn't move, didn't speak, but it pulsed, a wave of ice flooding the room. And in the faintest whisper, like wind through cracked walls, it spoke. Mine. Lorenzo's legs locked. He felt frozen. The word echoed inside his head. Mine. 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 He tried to speak, but his throat clenched shut. The shadow inched closer and closer. He could hear his heartbeat hammering like war drums. He gasped, "Amaya!" Her voice cut through the air, sharp and clear. "Leave him." Lorenzo turned. Amaya stood at the threshold, calm, steady, but her eyes burned with something fierce. The shadow twisted toward her. For a moment, the air vibrated. Like a silent battle, neither of them spoke aloud. Then, the shadow vanished. Gone. The room warmed again. Lorenzo collapsed into the chair, chest heaving. Amaya walked slowly toward him. "You shouldn't be here alone," she said softly. He stared at her, voice trembling. "What was that?" Amaya kneeled beside him. "That is the mark of the past, the shadow that follows your bloodline." He shook his head, hands in his hair. "It was inside me. I could feel it. Like it wanted to take me." Amaya nodded. "It feeds on fear, on guilt, on everything you bury deep." Lorenzo looked into her eyes, searching for something that made sense. "And you chased it away?" She exhaled slowly. "For now." They sat in silence, the crackling storm outside barely audible over the sound of Lorenzo's racing thoughts. He whispered, "How do I stop it?" Amaya took his hand gently in hers. "You stop feeding it." He frowned. "I don't even know how I'm feeding it." She gave him a look so tender, it nearly broke him. "You don't know me," he snapped. "You don't know what I've done." Amaya stood too, calm, unshaken. "Then tell me." He clenched his fists. "You want to know? Fine." He started pacing. "My father died chasing a deal I pushed him into. My brother died driving a car I bought him. My company destroyed families when I sold it to a corrupt investor. I ruined people. I ruined everything I touched." His voice cracked on the last word. He stopped pacing, chest rising and falling. Amaya walked to him, slowly, gently. And then she reached up and placed her hand over his heart. "You didn't ruin anything. You were a child. You were human. You made mistakes, and you suffered for them more than anyone else could ever." Lorenzo felt a tight knot in his chest start to loosen, but only a little. He whispered, "Then why does it feel like I'm cursed?" Amaya looked up at him, eyes shining. "Because you believed you were." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "You are not your past, Lorenzo. You are the choice you make next." He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he let himself believe her. That night, they stayed close. Lorenzo lay beside her, both of them wrapped in a silence that didn't need words. For the first time in years, his nightmares didn't come. But at the edge of sleep, he heard a whisper, "Mine, not yet." And when he opened his eyes, Amaya was watching him. She whispered, "It's not over."
The next morning, Lorenzo didn't wake to the soft hum of island birds, but to the sharp sound of something breaking downstairs. He bolted upright, the bed beside him empty. "Amaya!" No answer. He rushed down the wooden stairs, barefoot, heart pounding against his ribs. And there she was, in the kitchen, standing over a shattered clay bowl on the floor. Her hands trembled, but her face was calm. Lorenzo entered slowly. "What happened?" Amaya knelt, picking up the broken pieces with careful fingers. Her voice came soft, almost distant. "I dropped it." He crouched beside her. "It's just a bowl. We can fix it." She shook her head. "You can't fix everything, Lorenzo." There was something heavy in her words. He placed a hand over hers, stopping her from picking up another shard. "Talk to me." She met his eyes, and finally, she spoke. The shadow came again. Lorenzo's body tensed. "When?" "Before dawn." His heart raced. "Why didn't you wake me?" Amaya gave a faint, tired smile. "Because this is my fight too." They sat on the floor together, surrounded by broken pottery. She told him everything, the truth. The curse wasn't just a shadow cast by mistakes. It was born from blood. 100 years ago, Lorenzo's great-grandfather, Don Emilio de la Vega, arrived on the island seeking fortune. But he didn't come alone. He brought greed, and he betrayed a tribe that had welcomed him, stealing their sacred lands and silencing those who resisted. A woman among them, a healer named Alona, placed a mark upon his bloodline, a curse, that every firstborn son of his name would destroy all they loved. Not by sword, not by poison, but by fear, by guilt, by the shadows they carried within. Lorenzo sat in stunned silence. "This is real?" Amaya nodded. "As real as the pain you've carried your whole life." He shook his head slowly. "And you, how do you know this?" She met his gaze, voice steady. "Because Alona was my great-grandmother." The weight of her words hit him like a crashing wave. He stared at her, eyes wide. You're part of this." Amaya nodded. "I am the last of her line, as you are the last of his." Lorenzo stood upright, running a hand through his hair. "So this is what? A twisted revenge story?" Amaya stood too, her voice calm but firm. "No, I came to end it, not continue it." He turned on her, anger and confusion burning in his chest. "Why would you help me after everything my family did?" She stepped closer, eyes soft. "Because I chose to." They stared at each other in heavy silence. Lorenzo felt every wall inside him crumble. The truth was too big, too cruel. But then he saw it. The faintest shimmer of pain in Amaya's eyes. She wasn't his enemy. She was his only chance. He whispered, "How do we break it?" Amaya took a deep breath. "There's an old rite, a cleansing, but it comes with a cost." He frowned. "What cost?" Her voice dropped. "The curse feeds on fear and love. If you want to end it, you have to give up the thing you fear losing the most." Lorenzo's heart clenched. "You!" Amaya's eyes shimmered with something between sorrow and acceptance. "Yes." He felt the air thicken, the weight of her words pressing on his chest. "You mean I have to lose you? She nodded slowly. For the curse to break, I must give myself, and you must let me go. Lorenzo swallowed hard. No! Amaya stepped forward, placing her hand gently on his cheek. Yes. He closed his eyes, breathing in her touch, the scent of rain on her skin. This isn't fair, she whispered. It never is. They stood there for a long time, neither moving, neither speaking. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside his heart. That night, Amaya led him to the cliffs overlooking the sea. The moon hung low, casting silver over the restless waves. She carried the medal and a small clay bowl. Lorenzo followed in silence, his heart screaming with every step. They stopped at the edge. She turned to him. Are you ready? He shook his head. No, but I'll do it anyway. Amaya gave a soft smile. That's what makes you ready. She placed the medal into the bowl. Then she held out her hand. Lorenzo took it. Her grip, warm, strong. Together, they spoke the words of the rite, words Amaya taught him under the light of countless stars, ancient, powerful, a plea and a promise. When it was done, Amaya whispered, "Close your eyes." Lorenzo obeyed. He felt her hands over his heart, and then a warmth flooded his body, like a fire burning away everything dark inside him. His fears, his guilt, his shadow, gone. When he opened his eyes, she was gone too. The bowl lay empty at his feet, the medal dissolved into nothing. And Amaya vanished with the wind.
The wind howled across the cliffs, carrying her name into the night, but Lorenzo didn't call it back. He stood motionless, staring at the empty bowl at his feet. The storm inside him had quieted, but the silence it left felt worse. He walked back to the house alone, step by step. The medal was gone, the curse broken, but Amaya gone with it. The house felt colder now, the shadows on the walls longer. He moved through each room like a ghost, touching the things they had shared, the chair she liked, the herbs she gathered, the bed they had warmed together. Her scent lingered in the air, but she was nowhere, and somehow that hurt more than any shadow ever could. For the next few days, Lorenzo stayed in the house, waiting for something, for her, for a sign. But the days passed, and nothing came. The rain didn't return. Neither did Amaya. One morning, he stood on the same porch where he had first seen her, walking barefoot in the storm. The road stretched ahead of him, quiet and empty. His heart ached with a silent question. Did I imagine her? But deep down, he knew the answer. She had been real. Real enough to break his chains. Real enough to break his heart. The island changed after that. Or maybe he did. Lorenzo stopped taking calls from lawyers and buyers. He canceled the sale of the resorts. And instead, he met with the village elders, the tribes his family had once betrayed. He offered them the land, not for sale, not for profit, but as a gift, a reparation, a chance to heal what had been broken. At first, they didn't believe him. A De La Vega,
offering back what his ancestors had stolen? But Lorenzo stood before them, alone, unarmed, and said, "I don't want your forgiveness. I want your future." It took time, but trust began to grow. The elders agreed to create a community project, schools, health centers, jobs. Lorenzo funded it all, not as a savior, but as a man who had finally understood the cost of his name. Weeks turned into months. The house changed too. He opened its doors to the community. The children played in the garden. The old women used the kitchen to prepare meals for the village. The same house that had once held his family's darkness now echoed with life. And yet, every night, Lorenzo stood on the porch, waiting, hoping for her. But she never came. One night, he sat alone by the fire. The children had gone home. The house was quiet again, and in his hands, a single folded letter. Not his grandmother's, but one written in delicate, flowing handwriting he knew too well, Amaya's. He found it that morning, tucked beneath his pillow. No sound, no footsteps, just the letter, as if the wind itself had placed it there. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. The words, few, but enough to break him all over again. "You broke the chain, Lorenzo, but love was never part of the curse. It was your gift, yours to keep and to give. I was never meant to stay, but I'll never leave you. Amaya." Lorenzo pressed the letter to his heart, and for the first time since she vanished, he wept, not in pain, but in gratitude. That night, under a sky full of stars, Lorenzo whispered into the wind, "I'm not alone." And maybe, just maybe, the wind whispered back.
The letter changed everything. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave it meaning. Lorenzo folded it carefully and placed it inside a leather-bound journal, the same one his grandmother used to keep on her bedside table. He pressed his hand over the cover and whispered, "Thank you." Not just to Amaya, but to himself, to the man he was, and to the man he was becoming. Life on the island bloomed. The projects grew faster than Lorenzo ever imagined. The small health clinic opened first, staffed by local healers and doctors from the city who came for free. A school followed, then a community center where the old met the young. Stories flowed like water and laughter filled the air. The De La Vega lands, once symbols of greed, had become something else entirely, a beginning. People came to know Lorenzo not as a tycoon, but as a man who stayed. The man who didn't leave when the storm hit, who didn't run when the past caught up. They called him Kuya Lorenzo, Big Brother Lorenzo, a name he never expected, but one that felt right. Yet, at night, the ache remained. He missed her, more than he let anyone know. One evening, after a long day of meetings with the community leaders, Lorenzo walked the old coastal road alone. The sky painted itself in strokes of purple and orange, the sea calm under the dying sun. He walked and walked until the clouds began to gather. The wind picked up, soft at first, then stronger. The first raindrops fell, light kisses against his skin. And he stopped, right there, on the same curve of the road where he had first seen her. A storm, a woman, a beginning. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Amaya." The rain fell harder. He didn't expect her to answer. He didn't even expect a sign. But when he opened his eyes, there she was. Or, at least, a shadow of her, A figure, standing among the trees, barefoot, hair loose, wearing white. A girl, maybe 20. But her eyes, they held the same calm, the same knowing. She smiled at him, soft, gentle, just like Amaya. He didn't move, didn't breathe. And then she spoke. 4 words, the same words that had started it all. "I've been waiting for you." The world seemed to pause. The wind stilled. The rain stopped mid-air. Lorenzo felt his heart beat once, twice, and then the girl laughed softly, a laugh so familiar it ached. She stepped forward. "I'm Mia." Lorenzo swallowed, his voice barely a whisper. "Mia?" She nodded. "My mother's name was Amaya." It felt like the earth tilted beneath his feet. He stared at her, young, radiant, alive. But in her eyes, a reflection of a woman he'd never stopped loving. Mia continued, her voice soft. "She told me, if I ever met a man on this road, to tell him this." She paused, and then met his eyes fully. "You were never meant to be alone, not in this life or the next." Lorenzo felt tears burn behind his eyes. He whispered, "She knew." Mia nodded. She always knew. They stood in the rain, not strangers, not yet friends, but something bound them. A promise, a legacy, a chance at something new. Lorenzo smiled softly, wiping his face. Do you need a ride?" Mia laughed. "I was hoping you'd ask." They walked back toward the village together, step by step, the rain falling softly around them, the road behind them no longer haunted, and the road ahead wide open. That night, Lorenzo sat with Mia at the community center. She spoke of her travels, of the villages she had visited, of people she'd helped, much like her mother. And Lorenzo listened, really listened. For the first time, he wasn't searching for a shadow. He was walking toward the light. And somewhere deep inside, he felt Amaya's presence, not as a ghost, but as a part of him. A love that had never been meant to stay, but had never truly left.
Days turned into weeks. Mia stayed, not because she had to, but because she chose to. And in the way only time can explain, Lorenzo began to feel something unexpected. Peace. They worked side by side on the community projects. Mia brought ideas, fresh, bold, fearless. She organized women's cooperatives, art workshops for children, herbal medicine classes. Lorenzo funded it all, no questions asked. But soon, it wasn't about money. It was about something else, about giving and healing for everyone, included himself. One afternoon, as they repaired the roof of the old community hall together, Mia laughed at him. "You're terrible with a hammer." Lorenzo smirked. "Says the girl who fell off the ladder twice." Mia pointed at him with the handle of her hammer. "Hey, that was intentional. I like the view from the ground." They both laughed, honest, free. A kind of laughter Lorenzo hadn't known in years. That night, sitting by the fire with the elders, Mia told stories about Amaya, stories Lorenzo had never heard, stories he realized Amaya must have known he'd need one day. How Amaya had walked across islands healing the sick, how she'd refused to marry, saying, "I belong to the wind." How she'd whispered in her last days, "My heart stayed with him." And Lorenzo understood. She hadn't just saved him. She had chosen him. Even in leaving, she had stayed.
One evening, Mia approached him quietly. They stood on the same porch where he'd first met Amaya. Mia looked at the horizon, her voice soft. "You loved her." Lorenzo nodded. "Yes." Mia tilted her head slightly. "And you still do." He smiled faintly. "I always will." She met his eyes. "I'm not her." Lorenzo's smile deepened. "I know." Mia stepped closer. "And I'm not here to replace her." He nodded. "I don't want you to be." They stood in silence, the kind of silence that only exists between two people who see each other. And for once, Lorenzo didn't feel the need to fill it. The next morning, Mia found him in the old study, the room he had once feared. He was sorting through his family's letters, old photographs, forgotten journals. She leaned against the doorframe. "Cleaning the past?" He chuckled. "Maybe." Mia walked inside, picking up a faded photo of his father. "He looks like you." Lorenzo shook his head. "I hope not." Mia turned to him, serious now. "You hope you're not like a man who died too young, who carried too much pain." Lorenzo looked at her, heart tightening. Mia placed the photo down gently. "You carry his face, his blood, but you're not him." He whispered, "Sometimes it feels like I am." Mia stepped closer. "Then stop feeling and start choosing." That night, Lorenzo made a decision. He gathered the letters, his grandmother's, his father's, even his own scribbled regrets. He took them to the fireplace. Mia stood beside him as he lit the flame. One by one, he placed the letters into the fire, watched them curl, blacken, dissolve, watched the past burn. And for the first time, he didn't feel haunted. He felt free. When the last ember died, Mia touched his arm. "You okay?" Lorenzo nodded. "I think I am." Mia smiled softly. "Then it's time." He frowned. "Time?" Mia met his eyes. "To write something new." They sat at the old wooden table with blank sheets of paper between them. Mia started first, her handwriting fluid and light. A proposal for a scholarship fund, a plan for a new school wing, a project to teach the local children about their history, their true history. Lorenzo followed, drafting ideas, sketching possibilities, dreaming of a future unchained from the past. And when they looked at each other, they smiled. A smile not of romance, but of something deeper, a bond forged by pain, healed by choice. One rainy afternoon, as they watched children dance barefoot in the mud, Mia whispered, "You know, she'd be proud of you." Lorenzo turned to her, rain dripping from his hair. "Amaya?" Mia nodded. She said, "Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is stay." Lorenzo looked at the children, at the village, at the life he had built. He whispered, "Then I'll stay." And in the wind, he almost swore. He heard a voice, soft, loving. "I know."
The island woke with a storm on the horizon. Not a violent one, but one of those summer storms that rolled in slow, like it wasn't coming to destroy, but to remind them it was still there. Lorenzo watched it from the porch. Mia stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes on the sea. "Do you think it ever really leaves?" she asked quietly. Lorenzo shook his head. "No." She looked at him, curious. "The storm?" He smiled faintly. "The past." Mia gave a soft laugh. "I'm starting to think maybe that's the point." Lorenzo nodded slowly. "You don't escape it. You learn to live with it." That afternoon, the village gathered for the dedication of the new school. The walls painted by local artists, the doors wide open, the children, the heart of the island, filled the space with laughter and songs.
Lorenzo stood on the small stage, facing a crowd he never thought he'd call family. He held the microphone loosely. No notes, no rehearsed words, just the truth. My family came to this island carrying greed and left behind pain. The crowd fell silent. And for years, I thought I had to carry that pain too. He looked at the elders, at the children, at Mia. But someone taught me that the past isn't a chain, it's a lesson. He smiled gently. And I'm here because I chose to stay, and because I want to keep learning with all of you. Applause filled the air, and for the first time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. After the ceremony, Lorenzo walked the village paths alone. Not because he was avoiding anyone, but because he finally understood the difference between loneliness and peace. He passed by a group of children painting a mural, hands smeared with colors, faces lit with joy. An elder waved at him from her porch. He waved back. This was home. At sunset, he walked the coastal road one last time. The sky burned gold and purple. The wind carried the scent of the sea and the memory of rain. And when he reached the curve, she was there. Not Amaya, not Mia, but a shadow. A soft, translucent shape standing where Amaya once stood. Her outline blurred with the air. Her long hair moving gently with the wind. Lorenzo didn't freeze this time. He walked toward her, slow, calm, like greeting an old friend. When he reached the spot, the shadow shimmered, and then whispered, not in words, but in feeling, I never left. Lorenzo smiled, soft, honest. I know. The shadow dissolved into the wind, and for the first time, Lorenzo didn't feel the need to hold on. He let it go, with love, with peace. When he turned around, Mia stood a few steps behind him. She tilted her head, a knowing look in her eyes. You good? Lorenzo nodded. Yeah, I'm good. She smiled. Ready for the next storm? Lorenzo chuckled. Bring it on. They walked back together, side by side. No promises, no endings. Just life. And the choice to stay. The storm rolled in behind them, but this time, it didn't scare him. It was just the storm. And some storms were never meant to leave.
Some storms never leave, and maybe they aren't meant to. They stay, reminding us of the love, the choices, and the strength we carry forward. Lorenzo chose to stay. What would you choose? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We'd love to know your story too.